All right. My name is Sadi Shabazz. This is for my research methods class. My presentation is going to be on laws that disproportionately impact Black Americans. To start off, this is my introduction. So basically, I'm just going to be talking about the topic at hand, why it matters in criminal justice research, and the connections I made with my research methods. I'll be discussing how certain laws and criminal justice policy disproportionately affect Black Americans. This is more than just a political issue, and it's deeply more rooted to how we measure crime and punishment, collection of data, and overall just the criminal justice research methods. During this presentation, my audience will understand how researchers identify disparities, the methods used to study and analyze them, and also real world examples where law and policy have unequal racial outcomes. To start off, I want to use this is some of the methodology. Oh, I can't say that. Um, that I will be using how researchers study racial disparities. I'm going to use qualitative methods and quantitative methods. For my qualitative, we have interviews and case studies. For the quantitative, we have the unit crime report, arrest data, and the sentencing data. When it comes to studying on whether these laws impact black individuals disproportionately, researchers rely heavily on qualitative and quantitative methods. The qualitative research is what gives the context for what you're reading or what you're trying to study, research. So that would be like, the interviews with defendants and analyzing courtroom behavior. The quantitative data would include the statistics and the uh, unit crime report that I would be, using. So like those stats and data that I would be looking at. For my first example, I'm going to use mandatory minimum sentencing. This was introduced in the 1980s. It had a major racial impact and it requires fixed prison terms. The mandatory minimums were created at first to fight the drug crime, but research has shown consistently that it affects uh, black individuals more than any other race. The Department of Justice had a few studies that I researched, and they found that Black Americans were way more likely to be charged with these offenses, requiring mandatory minimums, even if their criminal history was similar or even identical to a white defendant. This is my first and one of the most obvious examples of where a law that appears race neutral has racial unequal outcomes. For my next example, I'm going to use the 100 to 1 crack versus powder cocaine law. Powder cocaine is usually like something you find in the white communities, crack is in the black communities. This is another great example. The 100 to 1 sentencing rule from the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. For possession 5 grams of crack cocaine, you will receive the same sentence as possessing 500 grams of powder cocaine. Since crack was so common in black areas and powder was more popular in the white and suburban areas, this specific law created a big racial disparity. This was revealed by comparing federal sentencing data, demographic analysis, and arrest data that I used. Next example is going to be the stop and frisk policies. This law had a low hit rate. It showed a lot of aggressive policing strategies, and it just overall had a lot of stops of black individuals specifically. When stop and frisk was first introduced, it allowed police to stop anyone they suspected of criminal activity. In big cities like New York, it was found that at least 90 of these stops were blacks or Latinos. I chose New York in specific because that's where Um, it was just the most, I want to say, most dense as far as just like a lot of, how do I want to say this? I'm gonna cut this out. I'm gonna just start this one over. Stop and frisk. My next example is the stop and frisk policies. It had a low hit rate. It was aggressive. It was an aggressive policing strategy that they used, and it showed a lot of disproportionately stops of Black individuals, just specifically. When stop and frisk was first introduced, it allowed police to stop anyone they suspected of any criminal activity. In cities like New York, in particular, it was found that at least 90% of these stops were Blacks or Latinos. And to add on to that, about 88% of those stops, no drugs or weapons were found. With this research, it showed two problems: low effectiveness and also racial targeting. Oh, okay. My next example is the three strike laws. The three strike laws had increased life sentences, harsh sentencing after the third felony, and it was just had an overall bigger impact for Black individuals. The three strike laws were put into place to help deter crime by giving individuals a life sentence after their third felony. Studies showed in Washington and California that it found Black individuals were being sentenced under these laws at a much higher rate. To find this information, researchers had to analyze criminal history data to find that Black defendants were more likely to be charged with strike eligible felonies compared to white felons or just white people in general. My research example would be sentencing disparities. It was found that Black men received 19% longer federal sentences for the same crime and having the same record. I used this using the Bureau of Justice statistics findings. One of the best quantitative research methods was the Bureau of Justice statistics, and it found that Black men do receive federal sentences at least 20% longer than white men for the same crimes. This is even after controlling for criminal history and any other variables. A great example of methodology revealing some hidden bias. Methodology is important because it distinguishes bias from coincidence. It shows systematic patterns and also identifies whether a law is harmful or not. And it also informs policy changes. With weak methods of research, you come to weak conclusions. When they are strong, it makes it possible to properly identify whether a law truly affects Black Americans at a harsher rate. Policymakers use this research to help them create reforms like the Fair Sentencing Act and bail reform. Some criminal justice implications would be policy reform, the impact it has on families, and the trust in law enforcement. Disproportionate enforcement damages community trust, undermines how legit the criminal justice system is, and it also increases generational incarceration. By understanding this research, it helps policies and rebuild fairness. And in my conclusion, I'm going to just talk about why it's important for future criminal justice professionals as myself, research methods that uncovered these disparities and laws that appear neutral but are still unequal. Many laws historically impacted Black Americans in a harsher manner, not because the law mentions race, but it's how it's being applied. Through strong research methods, we can understand their causes, measure disparities, and work towards a more fair and ethical justice system. And this is just my reference page. Like I said, I use the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the U.S. Sentencing Commission reports, DOJ Drug Sentencing Studies, National Institute of Justice, and Michelle Anders Alexander had an article called "The New Jim Crow," and that is it.